Nomor 1. Mineral zinc.
Zinc is the key. Zinc does a lot of things. It increases your resistance to infection. It'll decrease the susceptibility to viruses. But when there's enough zinc inside the cell, that virus cannot reproduce. And here's the problem. People with viruses, people with COVID-19, nearly always have a zinc deficiency. Because the virus, the infection, the immune system uses so much zinc, it can very easily deplete you. In fact, your neutrophils, one of the key phagocytes that goes after viruses, and they're considered a killing machine, is saturated with zinc. So zinc not only helps the immune system, you need zinc inside the cell to kill the virus.
Zinc somehow interferes with what's called nuclear factor kappa B. It interferes with the process so we don't have too much inflammation, so that the inflammation is corralled to where it should be and doesn't go crazy running through our body causing other secondary issues and potential co-infections. It's pretty cool stuff. Zinc really is much more powerful than we think. So between those four, we've got the perfect little harmony. Now, as an added side note, and I'll just mention this for a second, B vitamins like B6 and B12 are also very, very, very important, primarily because they build antibodies. So don't neglect your B vitamins, but quite frankly, unless you're really poor with your diet, you're probably still getting B vitamins in and probably not much of a need to supplement with them.
Nomor 2. Vitamin C kompleks.
It's not one part that provides the function, it's the pieces together. So just like one part can't tell time, one portion, one piece of the vitamin C complex can't do all the things that vitamin C is supposed to do. So they're all important, including the ascorbic acid, but it's the biochemical machine, it's the complex that does the work together. But ascorbic acid is not vitamin C, and ascorbic acid by itself does not provide these functions that we talked about.
Our immune cells don't use vitamin C unless they get called upon, unless they get activated. And when they do get activated, boy do they get activated, because they can absorb literally 100 times the vitamin C content that's in our blood plasma level. So they just soak up all that vitamin C like crazy. That's why when you get sick or when you're stressed out, your vitamin C levels in your blood plummet, because your immune cells just soak them up immediately. So they're basically like a fuel for your immune cells. So that's why it's more important to take a decent amount of it. I usually recommend that you kind of use your own guidelines there. Personally, I take anywhere north of 5,000 milligrams per day, but that's just me. Now, what's really important to know is that vitamin C fuels your immune cells, but your immune cells are useless without vitamin D. This is where you have to pay close attention.
Nomor 3. Vitamin D3.
Vitamin D3 is also known as cholecalciferol. This is the form made naturally by the body in response to sunlight. Vitamin D2 is also known as ergocalciferol, and this comes from plants. Vitamin D supplements come in the form of either vitamin D3 or vitamin D2. So if you're not getting enough vitamin D from the sun and or from the foods that you're eating, taking a vitamin D supplement is a good alternative. For most people, 800 or 1000 IUs either every day or every other day will be adequate. Me personally, I take 1000 IUs every day or every other day, at least when it's not in the summer. I'll put a link to the one that I take in the description below. Some people ask, which supplement should I take, vitamin D3 or vitamin D2? They're probably about the same in terms of effectiveness, but vitamin D3 might be slightly better. Regardless of which one you take, if you do take one, it's generally advised to never take more than 4,000 IUs per day, as this can result in toxic levels over time. But there are other factors to consider, and this is why it's always best to have a discussion with your doctor.
Vitamin D is what mobilizes our immune cells. I want you to think of this for 1 second. The immune cells travel through the bloodstream, they identify a pathogen. Let's say they see a virus. So they see the virus, and then they stick out a little antenna. And an antenna is a vitamin D receptor. So it's kind of like this. The reconnaissance soldier goes out, he finds an enemy, and then he hides behind a rock and pops open his little comm unit, and he calls in for backup via vitamin D. But if you don't have vitamin D, nothing ever gets activated. He's not able to reach the immune system. So this happens a lot if we're deficient in vitamin D, whereas the immune system begins to notify that there's an attacker, but there's no vitamin D to actually complete the signal. So without vitamin D, immune cells remain naive. They never truly mobilize. So at that point, what good is vitamin C? If vitamin C only fuels immune cells that are mobilized, really, without vitamin C is kind of useless. And then it gets even more complicated. Vitamin C is needed for vitamin D conversion. And there was a study that was published in the journal Nutrition that found this to be pretty darn interesting. They found that vitamin C influences an enzyme known as 1,25-D3 hydroxylase. This is the enzyme that converts vitamin D into its usable form. So without vitamin C, we don't have the enzyme that allows vitamin D to be utilized in its actual active form. Holy cow. So they took 10 subjects and they identified that their serum levels of vitamin D3 went up quite significantly if they took in vitamin C. So vitamin C is required for vitamin D, and then vitamin D is required to mobilize the immune system, and then the immune system needs vitamin C again. So you see how they kind of work together.
Nomor 4, Magnesium.
So we know vitamin C is important. We know that we need to make sure we're getting vitamin D, but in order to convert vitamin D once again and actually metabolize it, we need magnesium. When we convert vitamin D, we deplete our magnesium stores. And guess what? We're already depleted in magnesium. Okay, a large percentage of people, at least in the Western world, are very, very depleted in magnesium because our soil is depleted in it. It's involved in 400 different enzymatic processes. It is a cofactor for so many things. The converting enzymes just can't do their job without magnesium. So magnesium is drained and used up when we're converting vitamin D. However, it's required for vitamin D. So you see the problem here, right? So we need magnesium, then we need vitamin D, then we need vitamin C. And it's all this chain reaction. In fact, it's kind of funny when you look at some patients that are given vitamin D via their doctors, right? They tell them to take vitamin D, and then they measure their blood levels. They find their vitamin D never went up. Well, what's happening there? They're taking a vitamin D supplement, but their vitamin D levels aren't rising because they're deficient in magnesium. So the vitamin D they're taking in isn't doing diddly squat because it doesn't have the cofactor to actually allow the enzymes to be there to allow that vitamin D to become usable. We need magnesium as the underlying mineral for all of this to happen, for our immune system to truly work. I usually recommend probably between 400 and 800 milligrams of magnesium per day. So vitamin C, vitamin D, magnesium, and zinc. That is how you bolster and support your own inherent immune system.
Nomor 5, Sayuran.
I want to discuss the relationship between your friendly bacteria, your gut bacteria, we're going to call that microbiome, and your immune system. In fact, 70% of your immune system really is this microbiome, your gut bacteria. You have trillions and trillions of microbes living in and around your body that are constantly exchanging with you. You're giving them a place to live, and what they give you is immune protection. They give you nutrients, they help your blood sugars, and they give you other things that are beneficial. There's over 10,000 different species of friendly bacteria in and around your body. And 99% of them are non-pathogenic. They're the good guys. The great majority of microbes in your body are living in the large colon, just above and in the mucus layer. And then you have the colon cells, and then you have another layer of protection where you have certain immune cells or guards waiting for an invader to pop through so they can attack and eat them up. Having different types of vegetable fibers. So if you're eating just the same vegetable over and over and over, you're not going to near have the diversity that you should have. So you want to rotate your vegetables. You want to have salad with a lot of different things. That will help you.
Nomor 6, Puasa Intermittent.
Doing a fast longer than 24 hours when you're worried about getting sick is not a good idea. I've got some solid research to back this up. Now, shorter term fasting, like intermittent fasting, still seems to be good to go based upon a lot of the research, but longer term fasting, you may want to wait. Now, if there are any videos of mine that you pay close attention to and watch the entire thing, I really think this is one, because everything I'm going to describe is going to paint a big picture for you overall. I don't want you to think that fasting is bad. Okay, longer term fasting has tremendous effects on the immune system, but over the long term, not necessarily at the acute short-term level. In fact, when you fast for a few days, white blood cell count goes down 28%, but it goes down 28%, and then at the end of the fast, you create new white blood cells. So yes, with longer-term fasting, you're creating new white blood cells, which essentially gives you a fresher immune system. However, during the period of the fast, you could be somewhat immunocompromised. So we may want to shorten our fast. I'm going to give you some research, but also in this video, I'm going to help you break down how you should tailor your fast for best immune response, at least in my opinion. You see, the length of time of your fast matters tremendously. Okay, so the journal Cell also published another paper, and it found that T cells, which again are very important immune cells, would be reduced during a fast, a longer fast. But the difference in T cell reduction between a 24-hour fast and a 36-hour fast was tremendous, showing that after 24 hours, we start to really crush our immune system quite a bit during a fast. The scary thing is, after we break the fast, it takes a while for those T cells to come back up. It takes a few days. So the point is that a longer term fast should not really be done when you're concerned about contracting something or when you're exposed to pathogens. But shorter term fasts could still be good. Well, some researchers dove into that a little bit more, and again, published in the journal Cell. It turns out that our response to a bacterial infection versus a virus is totally different in the way of fasting. So it turns out that when you're in a fasted state and you have exposure to a bacterial pathogen, you actually come out ahead. So what the scientists did in this case, they took a bacterial pathogen and they found that when that bacterial pathogen inside a body was exposed to glucose, when there was glucose present, there was a higher mortality rate, showing that, well, if you're not in a fasted state, bacterial infections can be more damaging. But with viruses, it was the opposite. When a virus came in the body and there was glucose present, they did better. You see, a virus doesn't just affect tissues. It doesn't just affect specific cells there. Virus is interesting because it attacks the immune cells too. It invades the immune cells, which triggers what is called a cytokine storm or cytokine storm, potato potato. Basically what this means is the immune system has this overacting chaos of communication that triggers a massive inflammatory response and a massive immune response. Well, what does this have to do with anything? Because you would think that when you're fasting, you're going to be quelling that response, right? And normally you do. Normally when you're fasting, you're reducing some of that inflammatory or immune response. So as published in the Frontiers in Neuroscience, there was a paper that showed that during a fasted state, if a virus comes in the body, there's an increase in that cytokine activity, an increase in that over-communication. Okay, so normally you'd have some degree of cytokine over-communication, but in a fasted state, when a virus came in, there was even more. So it shows that fasting is really good for bacterial infections, but not so good for viral infections or viruses, right? Again, we're talking about longer term fasting. So what can you do with your short term fast? Obviously, you want to stay in shape, you want to get lean, you want to do what you can for your immune system. And again, we are supporting the immune system by fasting. We just have to do it strategically. So with your short-term fasting, if you're concerned about pathogens, you're concerned about contracting something, you want to keep your fasting probably between 16 and 20 hours and not push it beyond that. I am a huge fan of longer-term fasting, but it needs to be done in a much more controlled setting when you're not going to be immunocompromised or you're not worried about getting sick. So with shorter term fasting, what you do want to be doing is making sure that during your eating window, you're getting a lot of protein in. I say that because protein does trigger gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis does create glucose in the body. And like the study that I mentioned from the journal Cell, where glucose seems to actually help with viral infections, then you want to have a little bit of glucose, right? So gluconeogenesis could be your friend. Plus, protein has a thermogenic effect. It's going to help keep you lean. It's going to help keep your lean muscle on you. There's a bunch of reasons to keep your protein relatively high after you break your fast. I would also recommend alternate day fasting, so you're not fasting every day and you're not consistently quelling your immune system. Okay, and then after you break your fast, it's going to be very, very, very important that you get a high degree of antioxidants and a high degree of greens in. Super, super important, because what's happening is after you break your fast, you're going to have a degree of reactive oxygen species, a degree of oxidative stress that's occurring because you just loaded yourself down with calories, and that's going to cause a response, sort of a waste response. But additionally, immune cells that are active generate their own waste. So I usually recommend getting as many greens as you possibly can in. Rule number 1, no more than 24-hour fast when you are concerned with getting sick. So during cold and flu season, you may want to limit the length of fast that you do, contrary to what people tell you, okay? Rule number 2, increase your protein during your eating period. I would recommend increasing it about 20 to 25%, quite frankly, because you're trying to get A, extra protein for recovery, but B, glucose to get converted from that protein. Okay, rule number 3, antioxidants. Quite frankly, I don't care where you get them. Dark chocolate is a good one. Getting your greens in, using athletic greens if you want to, using the link down below. However you plan to. Vitamin C, also very, very, very good time to consume vitamin C, because then you're gonna actually get good absorption because of your insulin sensitivity after you break a fast.
Nomor 7, Healthy Keto.
And again, the beta-hydroxybutyric made by your own liver when you exercise, when you fast, when you embark on a low-carb ketogenic style diet, or you take MCT oil or ketone supplements, BHB has been shown, at least in animals, to reduce this NLRP3 inflammasome signaling hub, which at least in bats is offering some sort of protection from excessive inflammatory responses in the context of the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
Sometimes when you look up keto, you'll see this little pie chart thing right here. It'll say 20% protein, maybe 70% or 65% fat as far as the total calories, 5% carbs. Okay, this is very confusing for people because you have to calculate calories into grams and this and that. This is the simplicity right here. If you just envision your plate, okay, this is your plate. Half of the plate should be salad or vegetables, okay? A quarter of the plate should be protein. And the other quarter should be fat. So this 65 or 70% fat, which seems like a lot of fat, now remember 1 gram of fat is more than twice the calories of carbs and protein. So this is misleading. In reality, the volume of fat is really only, a quarter of your plate. And a lot of this fat is actually mixed with the protein. So it's not as much as you think. And then we have this small amount of carbs out here. Just to keep it really, really simple.
Nomor 8, Olahraga.
The entire group was divided into 3 categories. 1, those who consistently met activity guidelines of over 150 minutes per week at all 3 measurements. Let's call this Group A. Now, the second group was those who were consistently inactive with only 0 to 10 minutes per week at all 3 measurements. Let's call this Group C. Then there is the third group, those who were active in the range of 11 to 149 minutes per week or who had variability in their 3 measurements. We'll call this Group B. The big takeaways from the study is that people who were consistently inactive had a significantly higher risk of hospitalization, ICU admission, and death after getting COVID-19 compared with those who were active for at least 150 minutes per week. Also, what they found was that for those who were active over 10 minutes per week, meaning Group B, they did have some protection against severe illness or death from COVID-19, but not as much as Group A. Now, this was one study looking at the direct correlation between exercise and severity of COVID illness. More studies would be needed to confirm these findings, but based on what we have, it's one more reason to encourage and promote physical activity for everyone. Ideally, a minimum of 150 minutes per week.
Nomor 9, hindari stres dan gula.
Let's talk about a few key factors with immunity. One of them is stress, because the more stress you have, the more your immune system shuts down. Sugar is one of the worst things that you can eat because it wreaks havoc with virtually every function in your body, including your immune system. And what they're finding now with the coronavirus is that people with insulin resistance, that is a hugely complicating factor. That the death rate of people with insulin resistance, meaning diabetes or high blood pressure or cardiovascular disease, the death rate is many, many times higher.
Nomor 10. 10 makanan terbaik untuk imunitas.